Want 10% off your MTG singles? Go to Flipside Gaming and enter the promo code POWER in all caps to receive 10% off $10 or more. Want to see extra videos? Sign up to our Patreon and get access to our Discord, early access to videos, Patreon-only videos, and much more. Need a better life tracker? Download the Gauntlet app for your phone. It keeps track of your life totals, counters, win rate, and so much more. It's free, so go check it out. More info is in the description. Thanks for watching. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Playing with Power MTG, where we play with the most powerful cards in the most powerful formats. We are back with another gameplay from MagicFest Vegas. We attended MagicFest Vegas this year and had a great time meeting all of you and jamming some really fun games. We will also be attending SCGCon's Commander Celebration this November 14th through the 17th, so if you want to jam some games and possibly be on the channel, we hope to see you there. A quick thanks to all of our Patreons for their support. We really could not do this without you. If you'd like to become a patron, please check out the link in the description below and check out some of the perks our patrons get. You can also show your support by liking this video and subscribing to our channel if you're not already a subscriber. It really helps out a lot. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Ronald, piloting Tymna and Thrasios. Ronald's opening hand contains a Watery Grave, Deathrite Shaman, Simic Signet, Forest, Time Twister, Angel's Grace, and a Cyclonic Rift. Next, we have Brian, piloting Jhoira, Weatherlight Captain. Brian's opening hand contains a Walking Ballista, Dak Vaden, Impulse, Polluted Delta, Mana Crypt, Sulphur Falls, and a Mountain. After that, we have Eric, piloting the Gitrog monster. Eric's opening hand contains a Polluted Delta, Necropotence, Command Tower, Thoughtseize, Veil of Summer, Priest of Titania, and Dark Confidant. Finally, we have Ryan, piloting Godo, Bandit Warlord. Ryan's opening hand contains a Blood Moon, Mountain, Galvanic Blast, Goblin Welder, Gemstone Caverns, Gamble, and a Duretti, Scrap Savant. Without further ado, let's dive right in. Ronald lands 0-0 on the roulette wheel and gets to start us off. But Ryan has a pre-game action and puts Gemstone Caverns onto the battlefield, exiling Galvanic Blast. Ronald plays a Bayou for turn. He casts a Deathrite Shaman. He passes the turn. Brian plays a Polluted Delta. He casts a Mana Crypt. He cracks his Polluted Delta to fetch up a Steam Vents into play tapped. He passes to Eric. Eric plays a Command Tower for turn. He casts a Thoughtseize, targeting Ronald. Ronald reveals his hand, and Eric has him discard Time Twister. All through, Eric passes. Ryan plays a Mountain for turn. He casts Gamble. He fetches up a card into his hand and discards a card at random, which is a Goblin Welder. Ryan passes. Ronald plays a Watery Grave into play untapped, paying 2 life. He taps Deathrite for white, exiling Brian's Polluted Delta. He casts his commander, Tymna the Weaver. He gives the turn to Brian. Brian plays a Sulphur Falls for turn. He also casts his commander, Jhoira, Weatherlight Captain. He pays 2 life and casts Gitaxian Probe, targeting Ryan. He looks at Ryan's hand and suddenly realizes what Ryan gambled for, and he draws a card. He casts Walking Ballista for 0 to get the draw trigger for Jhoira. He casts Mox Amber. He casts Renegade Map. All finished for now, he ships the turn to Eric. Eric plays a Swamp for turn. He casts Priest of Titania. He ends his turn. Ryan draws his card, misses his land drop, and passes the turn. Ronald plays a Verdant Catacombs for turn. He cracks it for an Underground Sea. He attacks Ryan with Tymna and Eric with Deathrite. Both take the damage, and in his second main phase, Ronald pays 2 life and draws 2 cards through Tymna's ability. He casts a Simic Signet and gives the turn to Brian. Brian plays a Snow-Covered Mountain for turn. He casts Izzet Signet. He then casts Dak Vaden. Dak Vaden resolves, and Brian activates Dak for his minus ability, targeting Ronald's Simic Signet. In response, Ronald taps his Signet and casts Winds of Rebuke, targeting Brian's Jhoira. In response to that, Brian casts Impulse. He looks at the top 4, keeps 1, and bottoms the rest. Then Winds resolves, Jhoira bounces, everyone mills 2, and Ryan sadly mills away the 2 mana rocks he needs. Then Dak's ability resolves, and Brian gains control of Simic Signet. All finished up, Brian passes the turn. Eric plays a Polluted Delta for turn. He casts Dark Confidant. He ends his turn. Ryan draws his card, misses his land drop, again and passes the turn. Ronald plays a Flooded Strand for turn. He cracks it for an island. He attacks Ryan with Tymna and Brian with Deathrite Shaman. Both take the hit, and Ronald pays 2 life and draws 2 cards. He casts a Grim Monolith and ends his turn. During his upkeep, Brian loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. He plays an Ancient Tomb for turn. He casts Jhoira for the second time. He follows up by casting Words of Wind. Knowing how devastating that card is in a Jhoira deck, Ronald responds by casting Cyclonic Rift, targeting Jhoira. Jhoira bounces again, and Brian follows up by activating Dak, drawing 2 and discarding 2. He taps his Ancient Tomb to cast Sorceress Spyglass. Spyglass enters, and he looks at Ronald's hand. He then chooses Grim Monolith as the Spyglass card. All finished up, Brian passes. At the end of Brian's turn, Eric cracks his Polluted Delta for an Overgrown Tomb, into play tapped. During Eric's upkeep, he reveals Nature's Claim through Dark Confidant. He plays a Verdant Catacombs. He casts Nature's Claim, targeting Words of Wind. In response, and in order to cut off Eric's mana, Brian casts Flusterstorm. Eric pays for the Flusterstorm, Nature's Claim resolves, Words of Wind is destroyed, and Brian gains 4 life. He attacks Dak Faden with Dark Confidant, killing it. All finished up, Eric passes. Ryan draws his card, hoping to get that land drop. He misses it yet again, and passes the turn. Ronald starts off his turn by attacking Ryan with Tymna and Brian with Deathrite. Both take the damage, and Ronald pays 2 life and draws 2 cards. He plays a Misty Rainforest for turn. He cracks it for a Tundra. He casts his other commander, Thrasios, Triton Hero. Ronald gives the turn to Brian. During his upkeep, Brian loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. He casts Jhoira for the 3rd time. In response, and becoming the official police at the table, Ronald casts Pact of Negation, countering Jhoira. Next, Brian taps his Ancient Tomb to cast Jhoira for the 4th time. This time, Jhoira finally sticks on the field, and Brian follows up by casting Traveler's Amulet. Brian passes the turn. During his upkeep, Eric reveals an Emergence Zone through Dark Confidant. He plays an Emergence Zone. He casts his commander, the Gitrog monster. He does nothing else and passes. Ryan draws his card and hopes to get that land drop. He misses it again. Trying to somehow get back into the game, he casts Expedition Map. All through, and getting pretty desperate, he passes the turn. At the end of Brian's turn, Ronald activates Thrasios. In response, Eric cracks his Verdant Catacombs for a Bayou, drawing through Gitrog. Thrasios resolves, Ronald scries, and he reveals a Savannah, putting it onto the battlefield. During his upkeep, Ronald's Pact of Negation trigger goes onto the stack. In response, Ronald casts Angel's Grace. He chooses not to pay the pact and doesn't lose because of Angel's Grace. Ronald moves to his attack phase and attacks Ryan with Tymna. He pays a life and draws a card. He casts Ponder. He looks at the top 3, shuffles his library, and draws a card. He plays a Forest for turn. He casts an Elvish Mystic. He casts a Finehorn Elves. He casts a Mana Vault. All wrapped up, and in a pretty good spot, Ronald passes. Brian plays a Snow-Covered Mountain for turn. He casts everyone's favorite laser beam, Aetherflux Reservoir. In response, looking for an answer, Brian activates Thrasios, scrying and revealing a Brainstorm. He then casts Brainstorm, continuing to look. He draws 3 and puts 2 back on top. With no other answers, Aetherflux resolves. Brian casts Paradoxical Outcome. Knowing this spell will certainly mean doom for the table, Eric decides to do what it takes to stop Brian. He casts Reign of Filth. He sacks a swamp to make a black, triggering Gitrog and drawing a card. He sacks another swamp, making a black, triggering the frog and drawing again. Continuing to dig, he sacks his Overgrown Tomb, making another black, triggering the frog and drawing again. Then, finally finding something, he casts Slaughter Pact, targeting Jhoira, killing her. The table hits an uproar at the bold play from Eric, and Paradoxical Outcome resolves. Brian returns all artifacts to his hand, and Ronald gets his Simic Signet back, and Brian draws 6. Brian recasts his Mana Crypt. He recasts Mox Amber. He casts Urza's Bauble. He casts Mana Vault. In response, Ronald pays 2 life and casts Mental Misstep, countering the vault. Brian then casts a Felwar Stone. He casts a Personal Tutor. He fetches up a Fabricate into his hand. He casts an Ecor's Wellspring, drawing a card. He recasts Traveler's Amulet and gives the turn over to Eric. During his upkeep, Eric pays for his Slaughter Pact. Also during his upkeep, he sacks his command tower to Gitrog, drawing a card. He plays a City of Brass for turn. He plays a Phyrexian Tower as his Gitrog land for turn. He casts Wild Growth, targeting Phyrexian Tower. This is when he remembers his Dark Confidant trigger, and the table elects to have it go onto the stack since it isn't a May ability. Eric reveals a Llanowar Elves. He attacks Brian for 8. He casts a Birds of Paradise and passes the turn to Ryan. Ryan draws his card and desperately hopes to hit that land drop. He finally does and plays a Mountain for turn. Way behind on board and thinking of a way out, he passes the turn. During his draw step, Ronald takes a damage from his mana ball. He plays a Marsh Flats for turn. He cracks it for a Scrubland. He attacks Ryan with Tymna, Brian with Thrasios, and Eric with his Finehorn Elves. Living the dream, he pays 3 life and draws 3 cards. He casts Mox Amber. He taps his Deathrite for black, exiling a land from Brian's graveyard. He casts Yawgmoth's Will. Not liking to play, Brian takes a look at Ronald's graveyard. He then decides to fire the cannon and activates Aetherflux Reservoir, paying 50 life and targeting Ronald. In response, Ronald activates Thrasios, scrying to the bottom, hoping to find an answer. He reveals a negate and puts it into his hand. He casts Chain of Vapor, targeting Aetherflux Reservoir. Chain bounces Reservoir, and Brian chooses not to copy. The Aetherflux ability resolves, and Ronald dies. During his upkeep, Brian loses his Mana Crypt trigger and takes 3 damage. He taps his Ancient Tomb to cast Aetherflux Reservoir again. He casts Fabricate, fetching up an Isochron Scepter into his hand. He casts Isochron Scepter. Scepter resolves, and he imprints Dramatic Reversal under it. This is also when he realizes that he doesn't have enough mana to start the chain. He casts a Goblin Welder. He cracks his Urza's Bauble and looks at the card in Eric's hand. Finished up, he passes the turn. During his upkeep, Eric reveals a Finehorn Elves through Dark Confidant. Also during his upkeep, Brian draws through Urza's Bauble. Finally, still in his upkeep, he sacks City of Brass through Gitrog, drawing a card. Eric starts off by playing Wooded Foothills for turn. He cracks it, drawing through Gitrog and fetching up a forest. He casts Finehorn Elves. He casts Chrome Mox, imprinting Golgari Grave Troll. He casts Sylvan Safekeeper. He attacks Brian for 8. He activates Phyrexian Tower, sacrificing Dark Confidant, adding 2 black and 1 green through Wild Growth. He casts Necropotence. He casts Llanowar Elves and follows up with a Mana Crypt. Now, knowing that if it reaches Brian's turn, the game is over, he must try to find an answer. He activates Necropotence, paying 20 life and exiling 20 cards. Eric moves to his end step. Eric puts the 20 cards into his hand and begins to look to see if he found an answer. Ryan sacks his expedition map and fetches up a City of Traders into his hand. Eric states that he didn't quite find what he wanted with his draws, so he casts Ad Nauseam. Ad Naus resolves, and he reveals a Putrid Imp, Crystal Vein, Entomb, and an Abrupt Decay. This is the answer that he wants, but he is very low on life. He thinks about whether or not he should keep going, but remembers he runs the Eldrazi Titans in this deck, so he decides to stop. Eric then casts Abrupt Decay, targeting Isochron. Isochron is destroyed, and Eric follows up by casting Worldly Tutor. He fetches up Ulamog, the Infinite Gyre, onto the top of his library. Everyone, knowing what Frog does, braces for impact. Eric moves to his cleanup step, discarding down to hand sides, including Life from the Loam and a land. 2 things happen. Gitrog and Necropotence both trigger, and Eric stacks them accordingly. Gitrog's trigger resolves, and he replaces the draw trigger with a Dredge from Life from the Loam. This mills Ulamog into his graveyard, triggering Ulamog and returning Life from the Loam into his hand. What also happened was Dakmor Salvage was also milled, and another Gitrog trigger goes onto the stack. He replaces that Gitrog draw with a Dakmor Dredge, and returns Dakmor to his hand. Then Ulamog's trigger resolves, and he shuffles his graveyard back into his library, nullifying the Necropotence trigger. Unfortunately, he doesn't have the mana left to completely combo off this turn, so he then enters another cleanup step, discards to hand size again, and with no lands this time, Necropotence exiles them. All done, the turn passes to Ryan. Ryan looks at the board state, sees everyone tapped out, and knows this is his only chance to act. He plays a City of Traitors for turn. He casts what he gambled for all the way back on turn 1, which is a treasonous ogre. One by one, everyone passes priority, and the ogre resolves. Ryan pays 18 life and casts his commander, Godo, Bandit Warlord. Godo resolves, and he fetches up Hammer of Nazan onto the battlefield. Hammer triggers and equips to Godo. Ryan then pays 12 more life to cast Helm of the Host from his hand. Helm resolves, Hammer triggers, and Helm equips to Godo. Ryan then demonstrates his loop of infinite attack phases with Godo to win the game. Ladies and gentlemen, what a crazy game. Congrats to Ryan on his win. He was on the back foot most of the game and wasn't able to interact in any meaningful way. He did see his opportunity to win and took it. Ronald's deck definitely played table police and was never out of answers. He piloted the deck well and did a fantastic job of threat assessment. Unfortunately, Aether Flux just sometimes gonna get you. Brian's deck was his own brew and was absurd. He was always putting threats on the board, advancing his board position, and constantly threatening the table. Everyone was definitely dancing around his game plan. Eric's deck was amazing on how much it could do with so little resources. Eric piloted this very complicated deck with precision and expertise. He is a fantastic player. I know that this is cheating a little bit, but the player of the game just can't go to one person this game. The player of the game goes to Ronald, Eric, and Brian. Brian for his domination of the board, Ronald for his excellent threat assessment and interaction, and Eric for his superb piloting of Gitrog. The most valuable card goes to the Gitrog monster. So much was done with this card on the battlefield. It whittled away life totals, gave the ability to draw cards, and made for the longest instep this channel has ever seen. If you would like to play with us and possibly be in a future episode of Playing with Power, come to SCGCon this November 14th through the 17th for the Commander Celebration. We will be there playing and recording and would love to play with you all. Well, that about wraps it up for this week's episode. Stay tuned in the coming weeks for more gameplay from MagicFest Vegas this year. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time.